What's up, guys? Hello to Football Talk here, back for week 3 of a draft and roster review series of each division in the NFL, and we're headed south this time. We've already done the NFC and AFC North and East respectively, so today we're focusing on the Falcons, Panthers, Saints and Buccaneers. If this is your first time watching one of these videos, welcome first of all. We go team by team here, talk about every single player they drafted and their role in the new squads, then discuss each of these classes as a whole, how those teams are able to use the resources available, and what it means in the context of what the rest of the roster looks like. There will be 2 players I didn't get to in my film studies that will come up at some point here, just so you know, but I watched everybody else and we'll be able to talk about them accordingly. I added timestamps down below, as well as my social media handles, along with the link to my page hellotofootballtalk.com if you want to dive even deeper into the skill sets of these new draftees. Now, let's start things off with the Atlanta Falcons. And I'll always begin by quickly rattling off all the selections that they made before we talk about them individually. So first round, 8th overall, Bijan Robinson, running back Texas. Second round, 38th overall, Matthew Bergeron, offensive tackle / interior offensive lineman out of Syracuse. Third round, 75th overall, Zach Harrison, edge defender, Ohio State. Fourth round, 113th overall, Clark Phillips III, cornerback Utah. And then back-to-back picks in the 7th round, 224th and 25th overall, DeMarco Helms, safety Alabama, and Juwan Gwynn, interior offensive lineman out of South Carolina. And there was a lot of speculation about what Bijan Robinson might look like in the Falcons offense, which after all the discussions about the devaluation of the running back position, we had 2 go in the first 12 picks, and Atlanta kicked things off with Bijan here at number 8. Obviously a truly special talent, with the ability to make something out of nothing, but he's gotten a lot better at setting up runs conceptually, and if you allow him to get through the line of scrimmage, the way he can string together moves, make people miss, and create explosive plays is incredible. The line I had in my scouting notes: when he's surrounded by bodies, Bijan somehow appears totally calm, makes his move, and just leaves everybody reaching for air, which is how he set the Pro Football Focus single season record of 104 missed tackles across 257 carries last season. Also has soft hands, being able to catch a swing route in grades or attack down the field, and you can flex him out into the slot, and he's a legit 5th receiver. The only critique points you may have, other than his pass protection being still a bit of a work in progress, which it is for most college backs, there's a little too much tiptoeing going on behind the line of scrimmage, trying to make the big play all the time, and just getting back to where the ball is spotted. His fit in the Falcons offense is super intriguing because of the diverse run scheme Arthur Smith will drop him into, how he can legitimately play positionless football to some degree, rather than most coaches just hyping up the idea of it and letting their talent shine. To me, this is the overwhelming favorite for Offensive Rookie of the Year and a top 5 pick in fantasy football regardless of format. And they put somebody else in front of Bijan and the young quarterback Desmond Ridder in Matthew Bergeron, who they gave up one of the 4th round picks for, in order to move up 6 spots in round 2. Bergeron was very effective at left tackle for the Orange, even though his technique as a pass protector is still a bit wild, in terms of picking up the inside foot too much, not establishing his hands inside, and just framing rushes accordingly, while overall being wide with his arms limits his ability to apply force in the run game, but great girth throughout his frame, rolls those hips into contact, and is able to create displacement even if his hand placement isn't optimal, with loose enough hips to reach block free techniques. You love what he brings to the table on the move on skip pulls and getting out to the corner. There's a definite plan to his pass sets, where he changes up the way he kicks initially, how aggressively he approaches different rushers, with high end foot speed to mirror them, can throw in one-handed stabs, and is able to pull guys to the turf when he catches them off balance, to jump on top of them. So while he's still figuring those things out, I think he can certainly survive a tackle, but for now might be best suited inside a guard, where he has those bumpers to either side of him and less space to manage, and I think he starts right away at the left guard spot, while Matt Hennessy and Drew Dahlman compete for the starting gig at center, and now you have 5 guys out there with plus athleticism and ability to crush bodies on the fly. Then in the 3rd round to go defense, and invest more into a line that has already added David Onyemata and Calais Campbell. Zach Harrison is an insanely long defensive end who can lock out and play with vision through blockers, and creates issues for pass protectors with how much room for error he has thanks to those lanky branches attached to his shoulders, and free himself late a lot of times, combined with good ankle flexibility and power to push guys around with the bull rush if he digs those hands inside the chest. The problems with him unfortunately are that he pops right out of his stance a lot of times and presents a large surface area for blockers, more of a linear athlete in general, and I thought his motor kind of ran hot and cold, without a real pass rush plan to speak of. So with a switch at defensive coordinator from Dean Pease to Ryan Nielsen, we still have to figure out exactly what those front dynamics look like. Nielsen came over from New Orleans, but he usually are in even looks with those oversized defensive ends, so the player profile fits, even though they drafted a couple of small outside linebackers last year. So very interested in what that looks like, but Harrison makes sense also if they want to put him at 5 technique. Clark Phillips in the 4th is a guy many people fell in love with last summer already, and I get the idea of that undersized, super feisty corner that people want to talk themselves into, only lacking a couple of inches in height and arm length, at times even talking about if he had those, that it would actually be a first round pick. But he struggles to disengage from blocks and has a 17.1% missed tackle rate for his career. And my real holdup is that while he'll be a pure nickel most likely, due to being short and having just 4.51 speed, his best tape actually can play an outside. Now, his ability to anticipate where the route breaks, his easy change of direction skills, and the way he can play on the edge in terms of frustrating receivers without getting penalized for it is excellent. Shows great instincts and football IQ to toggle between reading the eyes of the quarterback and patterns developing, while displaying textbook technique at the arrival of the ball to rake it out of the receiver's hands. Atlanta traded peanuts for former third-overall pick Jeffrey Okudah. We expect A.J. Terrell to bounce back after a down year, and Richie Grant played a lot in the slot for his crew as a second rounder due to injury. But I would think Grant plays more of a traditional safety role this year, and Phillips competes with Mike Hughes, and maybe the next gap here for the starting role in the slot. And that's DeMarco Helms out of Alabama. Very aggressive player in terms of the way he drives on routes, which can be a positive, but also get him in trouble at times. Got absolutely burned like toast by Tennessee speedster Jalen Hyatt in their matchup last year, and ran a disappointing 4.57 to give you concern there. But if you take that game out, Helms allowed just 37 of 62 targets to be completed against him for 355 yards and 1 touchdown, compared to 4 interceptions over the last 2 years combined, and he had a solid missed tackle rate around 10% for his career with the Crimson Tide. So it's really about risk assessment here, and how much the new defensive coordinator is comfortable playing as much cover 1 as he saw at times in New Orleans, now that he has his version of Marcus Williams, and recently signed Jesse Bates as a guy capable of playing center fielder. If so, I would be a bit worried about the big plays Helms might give up, and he'll make most of his impact on special teams probably. Unfortunately, I didn't get to watch DeJuan Gwynn, who started 46 games at right guard for the Gamecocks and made second team All-SEC last year, but lacks the desired size and length. Not many proven pieces on the interior currently on that roster, so he has a solid path here to make it. Atlanta showed a lot of conviction with the guys they wanted to get. Now, would I usually advise any team to draft a running back inside the top 10? Not really, but it makes a lot of sense for where they are, because this team is so much built on the run game, and the ability to be super versatile in the personnel usage on offense, which now you give those touches to a real difference maker, and maybe nobody else helps this group win as many games as Bijan this season, as they're looking to compete for a murky NFC South. Bergeron I thought might be a surprise first round pick, and I don't have a problem with him there. Harrison was a little early for me, but a guy that I expected to come off the board in this range, and gives them more flexibility in terms of front dynamics, a couple more options in the slots where I'm not sure yet where they'll go, and maybe both the 7th rounders can make the roster. So while I don't love how they valued some of these names and positions here maybe, and I would have liked them to trade back rather than up early on, I see the vision behind this draft, and how it helps them be a pain in the ass to deal with for anybody in the NFC, which lacks those legit 2nd and 3rd tier contenders. The growth of Desmond Ridder as a progression style passer, along with what could be one of the league's top rushing attacks, and some of the designed opportunities for big plays off that, will determine how high the Falcons can climb. We're moving on to the Carolina Panthers now. Of course, they've been on the clock since the middle of March basically, when they acquired this first overall pick from Chicago in exchange for picks 9 and 62 this year, along with a 1st and 2nd rounder next year, and of course Pro Bowl level wide receiver DJ Moore. Altogether, only 5 selections, obviously 1st overall Bryce Young, quarterback Alabama, 2nd round 39th overall Jonathan Mingo, wide receiver Ole Miss, 3rd round 80th overall DG Johnson, edge defender out of Oregon, 4th round 114th overall Chandler Zavala, interior offensive lineman out of NC State, and then they already finished early on the 5th round 145th overall Jamie Robinson, safety Florida State. Everything that matters here, of course, is if Bryce Young can translate his game to the NFL and be a guy that gives the Panthers an advantage on the center compared to Derek Carr, Desmond Ridder looking to prove himself in year 2, and whatever the future plans are for the Bucs. The concerns here are well known, being 5'10 and closer to the 190 to 195 pound range in terms of actual playing weight. Not like a huge arm when the pocket collapses around him and he has no space to really step into throws, and he gains extra depth in his drops to see over the line of scrimmage, which creates more favorable angles for guys rushing off the edge. Yet you just can't deny the things that made him great at Alabama. Very flexible arm, quick release, consistently leads his targets towards green grass and run after catch opportunities, can attack the middle of the field much more consistently than we see from most Georgia quarterbacks. His ability to recognize leverage advantages find voids in zone coverage, and process defensive movement as special. Just an uncanny calmness with chaos around him, super elusive, and has that innate understanding for secondary plays developing and where all 21 other guys are on the field. Now it's about learning what he can get away with at the pro level. He will have to win from the pocket and avoid big hits more so, being content with plays being over, and letting an extremely experienced coaching staff in Carolina help him out. You put him behind an excellent young offensive line and have some weapons around him, which he didn't have a ton of other than Jahmyr Gibbs last year at Alabama, and you see if he can make this franchise legitimately relevant again in the near future. And they got one of those weapons early on day 2 with Jonathan Mingo, a guy that carries 220 pounds extremely well at 6'2", and reminds you of A.J. Brown physically, and the number 1 jersey for Ole Miss. Quickly gets up to full speed and was regularly asked to go down the field, can violently stick his foot in the ground and work back towards the quarterback after pushing vertically, but also uses power to create separation as he bends across the field against tight coverage, has those massive 10 3/8 inch hands that swallow passes, consistently extends for the ball, shields it well with his large frame, and can win above the rim, while then turning into a running back with the ball in his hands and having better quickness than most big receivers to make people miss. At this point there's very little pacing to his routes, and there needs to be more detail in the way he sets up defenders playing off. Not much in terms of the footwork to win against press, but rather relying on his explosiveness and power. But he's also one of the best blockers of the class, with that finishing mindset. I really liked Mingo on tape at a point where he was still in the mid-20s in terms of positional rankings, based on consensus, and then some more people got to him late, and he shot way up there, so ultimately it was a little early for me, but in terms of a big physical ball winner and run-after-catch specialist, he could be a beast for Bryce or glance routes of the RPO game and taking those shots down the field. This next one I pointed out as a reach in my big draft recap when Carolina packaged picks 93 and 132 for this either selection and to jump in on the edge run. Bottom line, DJ Johnson will be a 25-year-old raw rookie, spends way too much being hung up with blockers, undisciplined with the way he peeks inside in the run game, loses contain, very little in terms of a well-constructed approach or diverse toolbox as a pass rusher, but the betting on traits here with a guy that ran an elite 4.49 in the 40, with a 1.59 10-yard split, weighing in at 260 pounds. Tons of natural power and heavy hands to create traffic in the run game, squeezing blockers into the action and crashing into pullers behind the line. Frequently is able to condense the edge in passing situations and can dip underneath guys around the corner, along with impressive closing bursts to run on quarterbacks. Like I said, I look at this as a bit of a panic move due to the run on edge rushers before that, and I thought there were better ones available anyway at that point still. Carolina has been desperately trying to find that guy across from Brian Burns, who can legitimately win as a pass rusher, with Vita Gross-Matos at his best in the early downs, and a few similar profiles on the roster already. Don't see Johnson really making an impact as a rookie, however. Although I love Chandler Zavala at the top of day 3, the big thing with him have been injuries, where he's missed extended stretches with back surgery, and some minor bruises that have had him leaving the field during games. Otherwise, he's just not the most graceful mover in space, and tends to lean too far into rushes late in plays, which he therefore slips off them, because otherwise you're looking at a well-built guard at 6'5", 325 pounds, with tremendous football IQ, strong upper body, very controlled in his movement as a run blocker with expert understanding in wide zone, for when to attach, take over, peel off or bump guys over to help out his fellow linemen. It just always seems to be the right approach, and things work out to create a lane when the ball goes behind him in that regard. The hands and feet are in sync in pass pro, keeps a tight grip and solid base, great awareness for sorting out different games and twists on the interior, had an outstanding triangle week, and then put up elite numbers at his pro day, giving him a relative athletic score of 9.9. So if his medicals are fine, and he's healthy week 1, I think he slides right back in at left guard next to Ike Ekwonu, which those two absolutely bullied some guys together during their time at NC State. Austin Corbett tore his ACL in the season finale, and probably isn't ready by week 1, so I think it's more likely he tries to win a starting spot back from Brady Christensen on the right side once he's healthy again. And finally, I'm also a huge fan of Jamie Robinson, another guy who had some obvious question marks because he has sub 30-inch arms and ran a 4.59 at the combine, to where you worry about if he can legitimately run with speedy slot receivers, and you have to worry also about his long-term durability due to how reckless he is with getting involved in car crash collisions. But no doubt one of the best pure football players in this draft. You love the energy, how urgent he is with charging up the alley in the run game, defeating blockers with quick hands, but also not shying away from banging into bigger bodies. And then he's an elite tackler who consistently finds ways to get the ball carrier to the ground, where he has to wrap, drag, or lasso them down, leading to a missed tackle rate of just 6.2% over the last 2 years. The way he deciphers through patterns and leverages receivers as a deep zone defender is very advanced, but he also has light feet and good physicality to take on man coverage assignments against tight ends, and the Seminole coaches put him in a bunch of different places thanks to his mental capacity and feel and zone. So while Carolina signed Von Bell in free agency, you're looking at Xavier Woods as closer to a replacement level start, I would say. Jeremy Chin is the Swiss Army knife in the back seven. Eric Rowe can be a matchup piece as well, but I think there'll be some packages where we see Robinson after he makes an impression on the coaching staff covering kicks. So as I said, this will all rely on if Bryce can become a difference maker as a playmaking point guard for this franchise. They somewhat reach on a couple of high-level athletes at wide receiver and on the edge defensively, which I expect Mingo to have a big rookie season if they put the ball in his hands with room to work, and then to potentially get a starting guard, and a guy could play nearly half the defensive snaps maybe from year 2 on is excellent. Don't love the value on Mingo though, and I just can't get on board with Johnson as the 80th overall selection, when at best he was like the 25th highest ranked edge for me, so not a lot of picks. Instead of adding more shots added, Scott Fitterer trades a lot of capital available to get their guys. I definitely have some questions, although the owner will not care if we sit here a year from now and can say that they have the top quarterback in the division. So lots riding on that after years of promising defenses, and nobody understands that they can give them that balance in an offensive driven league, while the O-line has gone from a sore spot to one of the better young units league-wide. Then we get to the New Orleans Saints, who at least made 7 selections here. First round, 29th overall, Brian Brzee, interior defensive lineman, Clemson. Second round, 40th overall, Isaiah Foskey, edge defender, Notre Dame. Third round, 71st overall, Kendry Miller, running back, TCU. 2 fourth rounders, 103rd overall, Nick Saldiveri, offensive tackle, Old Dominion. And 127th overall, Jake Haener, quarterback, Fresno State. Then in the 5th round, 146th overall, Jordan Howden, safety, Minnesota. And finally in the 6th round, 195th overall, A.T. Perry, wide receiver, Wake Forest. This first round pick the Saints got back from the Sean Payton trade, which I'm sure they would have liked that guy to come back to the Big Easy out of retirement, but at least they did have a first rounder now, after giving away massive draft capital for the 2 picks they made early on last year, and they go Brian Brzee, a former number 1 overall recruit in the country, who had some dominant moments as a true freshman, but then was fighting through some injuries the next 2 years, and dealing with his little sister dying, which of course was a major tragedy that weighed on him heavily. But he played his best ball down the stretch this past season and put together an impressive combine performance to still go day 1. Nearly 6'6", 300 pounds, played all over the line for the Tigers, being able to land his hands in press of blockers forcefully, but also enough flexibility to reduce the near shoulder and rip underneath guys to create penetration in the run game. Can right guards back into the quarterback with the bull rush. You saw more instant wins at the line last year with the high swim, flashes a nasty spin move, and you saw him get home from different alignments, setting up twists, but also freeing himself late a lot of times. You didn't see him take over stretches of games really until late this past season. You'd like to see him play with his eyes up and work off blocks more consistently, and his way to reaction as a pass rusher at this point. But some of that had to do with all the different assignments he was given at Clemson, and he fits the mold of the Saints as somebody who can be a base 6 technique defensive end that slides inside on passing downs, yet he can also be a full-time free technique, and there's certainly reason to believe his best days are ahead of him. And they went right back to the D-line with pick 40, not quite as big, but still 6'5", 265 pounds, whilst testing in the 90th percentile in the 40 in broad jump. Foskey is a hard-nosed, versatile run defender who has experience filling gaps from off-ball alignments, but you like the forceful, active hands near the point of attack to work off blocks as well as crash into pulling guards. Those hands are also used as tools to assault offensive tackles, where he can work his speed off the edge and get around the corner with 2-handed swipe moves, but it's when guys expose the chest that Foskey really creates issues for them. I thought too often his head got stuck in the frame of blockers and him losing vision on the ball in the run game. There's some ankle tightness limiting his ability to flatten towards the quarterback, and once his initial angle is cut off, I didn't see the reactionary quicks to still find ways to win as a pass rusher. I thought Foskey was actually overrated last summer due to how many turnovers he was involved in, and this is still a little bit early for me personally, but in terms of somebody who can create problems with speed to power, length and ferocity, to step in for Marcus Davenport, I see how the Saints just want to keep bringing in new bodies, although maybe they should change up their ways a little bit because of the resources they've invested into those type of players in the past and the value they've gotten out of them. Third round they target running back in Kendry Miller, a guy who was key in TCU's miracle season up to the national championship game when he put up over 1,500 yards and 17 touchdowns from scrimmage, with several big performances in the most pivotal contests. Super patient and has the vision to find lanes opening up late, has some creativity to work around trash, change up his footwork on the fly, and he almost looks like Aaron Jones at times in the way he kind of side shuffles and pulls himself underneath a blocker whilst his body is still pointed laterally on zone schemes. Now, he doesn't really have the same kind of explosiveness that Jones does. He does gain good yardage through contact by sliding over tacklers and finding ways to regain balance, but he's not really making a lot of people miss one-on-one, while his usage in the pass game was largely swings or flat routes, at times off chips, and very few one-on-one reps in blitz pickup. But you like the way he eludes traffic and utilizes his blockers in space as part of the screen game, and he was able to at least create positive yardage when he flipped the ball out to him as a check down option. With the lack of clarity around the Alvin Kamara situation, they did re-sign Jamal Williams coming off a career year, who will be a short yardage and goal line specialist. They also brought in Eno Benjamin, who weirdly doesn't get the chances I think he still deserves after showing some signs in Arizona last season before voicing his displeasure with the lack of usage in the offense. So not sure exactly what they envision Miller's role to be, but using a high pick like this should tell us that they do want to get him involved extensively, and if Kamara is suspended for a large stretch, he might be number one in the pecking order. Day 3 the Saints were first to get on the board, as it marks a streak of 24 straight trade-ups compared to no trade downs, when they targeted Old Dominion's Nick Saldiveri in exchange for picks 115 and 165. Great explosiveness off the snap, playing right tackle, you regularly saw him blow defensive tackles off the landmarks on down blocks, but can also latch and drag guys on the edge out to the sideline on the front side of zone calls. I think his feet and punch timing are good enough to stay out of tackle, but his smooth redirection skills and ability to anchor against power also make him an intriguing transition candidate to guard, since his arms are borderline in terms of tackle length, which combined with a very patient approach in pass pro, could lead to him getting long-armed regularly at the NFL level, and I think generally will benefit from keeping his hands in tighter as he goes for his strikes. A bit of a late rise in the process, right around where I valued him personally, and I guess the idea here is to move on from a steadily below average start at right guard in Cesar Ruiz on the final year of his first round rookie contract, gives you some flexibility if you're dealing with injuries along the front, and then could be a quality starter at a low cap hit next year. Plus, then New Orleans packaged a 7th rounder and a free next year to grab Jake Haener 127th overall, who was my QB7 and somebody I referred to in the past as somewhat of a deluxe version of Brock Purdy, at least before the hype got out of control once he took over as the quarterback for the 49ers. Very much in control at all times as a thrower, I believe, getting his cleats into the ground to drive the ball, but can also feather it to guys at a full sprint, capable of getting to 3 or 4 in the progression at times, consistently delivers away from the next closest defender in zone, and will punish defenses for not closing windows in more static looks. He's also slippery to elude pressure, keeps his eyes up outside the pocket, and delivers with different trajectories, along with having picked up several key first downs with his legs before. He simply doesn't have the prototype profile in terms of size and athleticism the NFL is typically looking for. You'd like to see him give his receivers chances to make plays more regularly, instead of leading them out of bounds at times, and because he tends to drift towards his targets a little bit, you question if he has pro-level arm strength, but I think with how much he stood above the rest during Senior Bowl week, his playmaking skills on top of the toughness and leadership qualities, I would not be shocked that if the Derek Carr marriage isn't going great, this guy eventually starts for a few years in New Orleans. Jordan Howden I'm going to be a little quicker on, operated in the diverse split safety based defense from Minnesota, light on his feet for being a pretty big safety, best at driving on routes in front of him in quarters, and staying square to bigger bodies one-on-one in the slot, whilst his combination of length and suddenness to get around blockers and the dependable tackling skills are definitely a plus in the run game, but either he allows guys to work up to his blockers or gets too aggressive with his angles from depth, and doesn't have the quickest change of direction or transition skills, so I don't expect him to start over Marcus May or Tyrann Mathieu after what they paid those guys in free agency last year, but he may end up being the primary backup looking at the depth charts. The Saints also traded away a late 3rd round pick from 3 years ago in tight end Adam Troutman in exchange for swapping the 7th for the 6th round pick that is coming up, before they finalized the deal of Foster Monroe for a couple of years, who was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma on a physical a couple of weeks ago, but apparently treatment is going well, and he's expected to play this season now. So that's obviously awesome for him and for the Saints, because he's a starting level tight end in this league. Now with that pick just inside the top 200, they get A.T. Perry, a top 10 wide receiver for me personally. I heard something about character stuff that I'm just not totally aware of, but otherwise I have a tough time seeing him fall this far. In a wide receiver class full of undersized dudes, this guy at 6'4", 200 pounds, has tremendous feet and route running prowess for his size, where he's much more flexible and deceptive with his body language than you'd expect. Yet then he also brings those qualities of a tall receiver in terms of the knack for drawing flags, the 6'10 wingspan, and ability to elevate for balls over the heads of defenders. His frame needs some more muscle. You saw him drop more passes than you'd like to see because he left his feet when he really didn't have to, and I don't think the 4.47 quite shows up that way on tape, where he lacks that extra gear to separate late on vertical routes or gets away from guys as a runner. But on this roster, where we haven't seen anything really from Michael Thomas over the last 3 years almost now, I see a path for this guy as a 6th round pick to start on the outside across from Chris Olave, ultimately a few weeks into the season. That would be pretty crazy. So as you can tell, my tone certainly changed for this group as we got to day 3. Brazil the first is fine with me in terms of value, and a guy I'm willing to bet on having a bright future. The 2 guys on day 2 I don't love in terms of value, but then to get a potential start on the O-line, at worst a high-level backup quarterback, a solid number 3 safety, and what I believe can be a starting receiver in this league all on day 3, that's where they kind of elevated themselves after going with very Saints-like players before that. I guess this group under Mickey Loomis just keeps kicking the can down the road until the NFL maybe steps in at some point in terms of the way that they allocate financial resources and restructure deals in a way that you'd think weren't legal. But the Carr signing, combined with this draft, signifies that they're still of the belief they can compete in a top-heavy NFC, which are currently favorites to win the division and host a playoff game. Let's see if they're right with that. And then we finish things up with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the biggest class of the division by 2 picks. They go first round 19th overall Kalijah Kancey, interior defensive lineman out of Pittsburgh, second round 48th overall Cody Mauch, offensive tackle / interior O-line out of North Dakota State, third round 82nd overall Yaya Diaby, edge defender out of Louisville, 2 5th rounders, 153rd overall Savachi Dennis, linebacker Pittsburgh, and 171st overall Payne Durham, tight end Purdue, 3 6th rounders, all within 15 picks, Josh Hayes, cornerback Kansas State, Trey Palmer, wide receiver Nebraska, and Jose Ramirez, edge defender Eastern Michigan. And then finally in the 7th round, 232nd overall Carrington Valentine, cornerback Kentucky. And they kicked things off with a bit of a curious selection. I value Kalijah Kancey in the mid-20s personally, and I thought for an even front team that just puts him in free technique and asks him to blow shit up, he could be a real difference maker. But unless we see a shift in front dynamics from Todd Bowles, who is more of a traditional 3-4 guy, I'm not sure you mitigate some of the concerns he brings, which are Kancey is a 6 foot, 280 pound defensive tackle with 30.5 inch arms, lacks the mass to anchor against double teams, and he gets a little too far out of his pass rush lanes, in part because he has to work overtime and take wider paths due to the lack of length. Now, the tape is freaking awesome, as you consistently see him penetrate up the B-gap with his burst up the field, is able to arm over backed up blockers with tremendous lateral twitch, his low paddle was definitely a plus there, and he ran a 4.67 at the combine. The explosion also shows up rushing the passer, getting a bunch of instant wins, cross-facing guards, and even pulling off cross-drop maneuvers at times, whilst having improved his ability to finish rushes. I think the value is fine, but I worry about what the plan is, and if you're wasting this guy's talents, a little bit at least, as just a sub-package rusher maybe, so interested in seeing if they actually fully take advantage of what they invested in here. Then the Bucs come back in the 2nd round and grab one of my favorite players, Cody Mauch, now famous for the picture of him missing his front teeth, is a guy whose joy for moving men against their will and putting them on the ground when he gets the chance to is palpable. Super flexible to sink, steer and drive defenders with that mean streak of his skills to secure targets on the 2nd level and get out on the move as a puller are tremendous. That's backed up also with an insane time of 4.46 in the short shuttle at his pro day, which would have easily led all offensive linemen at the combine. Can get a little top heavy in that regard, below average length for a tackle, and he lacks any type of advanced hand usage at this point, I would say. But that's why I like him moving inside to guard most likely, where his foot quickness to mirror twitchy active rushers can really shine, keeping guys tight to his chest, actively refeeding his hands, and finding the mobility in his joints to lay the anchor. But trading away Shaq Mason for basically nothing, they had an opening at the other guard spot across from recently signed Matt Filer. I think Mauch wins that battle against Aaron Stinney and Lick Leverett and starts week 1 with the arrow certainly pointing up as maybe the most athletic offensive lineman overall in this draft. And the Bucs yet again bet on athleticism in the 3rd round with Yaya Diaby, a 6'4", 260-pound defensive lineman that played a lot of 4-eye and 5 technique for Louisville, but has those 34-inch arms and profiles as a guy with enough juice to win off the edge. He ran a freaky 4.51 with a 1.56 10-yard split, hit 37 inches in the vert and 10 feet on the broad jump, along with looking pretty good during the on-field workout. He can create a lot of chaos with his initial charge of the line, but also some pretty impressive moments of recognizing plays and changing directions, has the jolt in his hands to make even guards trying to sit down on him walk backwards, shows the sturdiness to stay on his feet as he gets banged around, oftentimes as the setup man on games, and unpacks a nasty spin move every once in a while. He's a little late off the ball at times, could do a better job of anchoring against angular blocks, and whilst alignment played part in the lack of development in that facet, he needs to learn how to rush half the man and be more efficient with his hands to soften corners for himself. I think depending on the recovery process of Shaq Barrett, you're looking at a guy that has a Jason Pierre-Paul type of profile and can develop into a difference maker who learns on the fly alongside Joe Tryon-Shrinka, even though there may be some bad moments early on. I'll try to be a lot quicker here on the day 3 guys. Savache Dennis is a fun, undersized linebacker who plays an instinctive and aggressive brand of football, with active hands to avoid blockers getting into his frame, light on his feet to gain depth or width in his drops, and understands where offenses want to attack in order to crowd those passing windows, while being a nice add-on rusher and very reliable tackler. You're just looking at a bit of a feast or famine type of player with an extremely narrow frame and who overruns his fits too often. The Bucs got a linebacker I actually like significantly better as an undrafted free agent in Tennessee's Jeremy Banks, so don't be shocked if he sees more run on that defense if both make the roster. Payne Durham is a very solid two-way tight end who won't wire with his speed down the seams or dynamic moves after the catch, and because of his high-waisted build, has a limited ability to convert power from the ground up as a blocker, but really good at latching onto targets on the move, nice initial burst off the line, and ability to elude getting hung up with ancillary zone defenders, immediately gets his head turned around once he clears bodies on the second level, and extends for the ball consistently, whilst being pretty unfazed by contact at the catch points, illustrated by a contested catch rate in 2022 of just over 57%. If you label Cole Keith as more of a flex fullback, Durham could easily be the tight end 2 behind Cade Otton. I didn't get to watch either one of the two corners in depth unfortunately, but both long arms and mid 4.4 speed. Tell me if you've ever heard that before for a Bucs corner under the coaching staff. Trey Palmer is somebody who impressed with the fastest GPS time during Senior Bowl week, and then backed it up by running a 4.33 at the combine. Almost all of his production came either on passes traveling 20 plus yards down the field or after the catch, where he can almost lull defenders to sleep by just gliding before finally kicking into another gear, with some wicked stop maneuvers after the catch, but had an infuriating career drop rate of 13.8%, very poor contested catch rate despite his long arms, and too much dancing around on those designated touches. After a very strong and highly compensated trio of wide receivers, not much else on the roster for the Bucs, so he'll get his chances and compete for opportunities to return kicks with Devin Tompkins. The one guy I do really like though is Jose Ramirez from Eastern Michigan, just inside the top 200 picks, right on the fringe of my top 20 edges in this class, which would be a lot higher in most years. Brings heavy hands at first contact, and excellent change of direction skills, direct to quarterbacks pulling the ball or reverses, and provides ferocious pursuit chasing after plays. Routinely was the first man off the ball when I watched the tape, can really dip the shoulder and win the corner, with strong enough ankles along with flashing the hands to force tackles to commit, and then packing a violent long arm. Had a massive 21.5% pass rush win rate this past season, and really made an impression on me during Shrine Bowl week. Unfortunately, all the size measurables are in the bottom 5th percentile, gets a little unreliable with his contain responsibilities, and when tackles are able to strike first and establish that first meaningful contact, his rushes are often negated, where you can't bully guys the same way you used to anymore in the NFL. But I think this guy makes the active roster and sees the field at times as a designated pass rusher. So looking at the class as a whole, Kansas at the top is the one that had me scratching my head a little bit, because they've never really targeted the type of player profile under Jason Light and the defensive coaching staff. Interested in if we see them change things up in terms of the fronts that they run to some degree here. After that, it's very much in line with what they usually do in the draft. They put a big focus on restocking the defensive front, yet another combo tight end, add some long athletic bodies to the corner room, and some more speed to the special teams unit. They never really do anything splashy in the draft, I feel like, and just find guys with the traits that they covered, although the one they do go off the board with, so to speak, is in the form of a top 20 pick that I'm not sure the coaching staff will maximize schematically. Jose Ramirez in the 6th round is the one value pick I love, but otherwise no surplus value selections I thought. And that brings us to a divisional draft rankings, which in this NFC South is pretty underwhelming to be honest. I put the Saints at the top because they did find some great value on day 3, even though before that they kind of went with guys that fit what they like rather than picking the best players available. They restocked the lines on both sides of the ball, get a tall skilled receiver all the way in the 6th round in A.T. Perry, who I think could be a legit producer early on already, and quarterback Jake Hayner is a guy I believe can start in this league for stretches, so that's why they're a little above the rest for me. And then it's a three-way tie between the Falcons, Panthers and Bucs. You like the conviction all of them showed, but other than like one pick for each of these teams, No others I thought presented surplus value for when they were made. Each of these organizations with a bit of a reach in the third round finally, although very different directions, with Atlanta making more so finishing touches to the offense to see what they have in Desmond Ridder, Carolina making a big move for Bryce Young at number 1 and surrounding him with the pieces he needs to find success early on, and Tampa continuing to invest into areas that have some strengths for them whilst they figure out where this franchise is headed. So yeah, probably the least impressive collection of draft classes, but should be a very interesting division where right now we see the current champs, even though it was somewhat by default, at the bottom in terms of projections, and each of the other 3 have paths for rising to the top. That's gonna do it for this one though. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please consider leaving a like and subscribing for future episodes if you haven't yet. Also feel free to let me know your thoughts in the comments, and if you could share the video with a fan or 2 of one of these teams, that would be greatly appreciated. The 2 North and East divisions are already up. If you want to just listen to another one of these, we'll hop back over to the AFC later this week with the other South division, where we get to talk about the 3 other quarterbacks selected within the top 35 picks. Hoping we'll come back for that. Once again, you can check out all my work at hellosonfootballtalk.com. Link for that is down below in the video description, along with my social media handles, in order to stay connected throughout the off season and see everything I've got going on. So until then, see you later. Peace!